Okay, so in the last video, we made a frequency table for single values, and we only had certain single values. But notice here that if we were to try to list all the values we have values starting from the smallest 34 all the way up to 100. And if we listed all of those, we'd have this really, really huge table. And many times we're going to have data sets that are in the tens of thousands or even the hundreds of thousands. We certainly don't want to list single values in our frequency table. So what we do is we do what we call classes. We clump together values. And we want to make sure that our classes are always the same size as each other. So since we're talking about a test in this particular example, it might be a good idea to kind of clump our classes together in sets of 10, because we know, for example, that a 70 to a 79 is usually considered a C. So if we clump things together so that they're in a class of 10s, group of 10, it'll make a whole lot of sense. So let's see, our lowest score is a 34. So let's make a class that goes from 30, our lower class limit, to 39. And then my next one would be 40. Notice they're 10 apart, so that's very important. To 49, also 10 apart for the upper class limit. 50 to 59. 60 to 69. 70 to 79. And 80 to 89, and 90 to 99. And I need one more because my 100 is not going to fit in a class. So let me insert one more row. So it would go from 100 to 109. Of course, we don't have any scores up there. We only have the 100, but we have to have a place for everything to fit. All right, now what we do is we count up how many we have between each of these values. So I'm going to use my draw feature again, and I'll count up all the 30s. Let's see, we have a 34. I think that is it. So in the box for the 34, or for the 30, I'll put there's 1. All right, I don't think we have any 40s. No, does not seem to be. So that's 0. 50s, though, we have a few 50s. So let's see, we have 1, 2 that are in the 50s. So I'll put a 2 right there. 60s, let's see what we've got in there. So we have 1, 2, 3, 3. So I'll put a 3, if I can get out of the draw feature. 3 in there. All right, 70s. We've got more 70s to be sure. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so 8. Put an 8 there. And then let's see, 80s. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right. And then 90s. So let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And then finally, of course, there's only one 100. Now, there should be 30 scores when we add them all up. So let's see, 1 plus 2 is 3, 6, 14, 25, and 5 more, 30. So we've accounted for all of them. It helps to sort of strike them off as you're going like I did so you don't miss a score. when dealing with upper and lower class limits. Now, we arbitrarily, well, not arbitrarily, we chose the class limits according to the fact that normal grades fall within these kind of 10 units, like the 70 to 79, 80 to 89. We know that's a C, that's a B, that's a A. Of course, the 100 is also an A. But these are normal class limits for something like a test. That might not be the case with something else, but it is kind of normal for us to often choose class limits that are within 10 units of one another or within 5 units of one another. What we have to be careful about is we don't want a huge number of classes. So you don't want like 30 classes or 20 classes. You want to keep it probably around or beneath 10. You also don't want too few classes. So if you just have 3 classes, it really doesn't tell you much information about the data. Here we can tell that the majority of students are scoring Bs, and we can guess that probably the average is somewhere in the range of a B because there's so many students scoring Bs and then quite a few also that are scoring into the C range. So our average is going to be somewhere in here. All right, now relative frequency. To get relative frequency, we take the frequency and we divide by the number of scores we had, 1 over 30. And if we put 1 over 30 into the calculator, our relative frequency, and I'll round it to 4 decimals, is 0.0333. This is also, if we changed it into a percent, it tells us that 3.33% scored within this range. All right, now there's none that scored in here, so we can put 0 there. 2 out of 30 is going to be 0.0667. If we round that off, 3 out of 30, now that's 0.10, so 1/10. 8 out of 30, let me put that in there, is, so we've got almost 27% who are scoring in the C's in this, and 11 out of 30, 36, oops. So almost 37% are scoring a B, and then 4 out of 30, and 4 out of 30 is going to be, oops, 0.1333, and then finally again 1 out of 30, which is 0.0333. All right, now if we add up all of these decimals, they're going to add approximately to 1. They might not quite be 1 because we did round things, and when we round things, sometimes we get a number slightly smaller or slightly larger than 1, but they will essentially add up to 1. All right, now from here, we're going to take this frequency table that we've just made, and we're going to make what we call a histogram. And in statistics, a histogram is a common way for us to represent data. Now, we are going to make a histogram by thinking about the middle of these class limits. The middle of between 30 and 40 is 35. So as we get ready to graph, we're going to use the midpoint of our classes. Now, to understand that better, though, let's begin to draw a graph. I'm going to make an X and a Y axis. But when we look at a histogram, it's only going to be the first quadrant of an X and a Y axis. On the X axis, we are going to put our class midpoints. So let's notice that midway between 30 and 40 would be 35, and then here it would be 45 and 55, and so on all the way up. So rather than marking, though, all the numbers between 0 and 35, I put little slash marks here to show that I have skipped over to my very first class of 35. All right. Otherwise, we would have to put 5, 15, 25, going all the way up, and we'd have to have those marked off. But this sort of a shortcut so we don't have to put all the marks that are in between 0 and 35. Now these should be evenly spaced. I'm not perfect when using the draw feature. And our last one is going to be between the 90 and the 100, oops, 85. So it's going to be 95. Now, on the y-axis, we are going to put the frequencies. So our highest frequency was 11, so I'm going to try to get all the way up to 11. Hopefully, I left myself enough room. Going to be close. I think I'm just going to make it. Okay, now we want to label these. Down here, this was the scores. We could even put scores on a 111 test if we want. And then over here, this is the frequency. And trying to write the word frequency in this direction is going to be a challenge. There we go. All right, so we are going to draw bars for each one of our frequencies. So between 30 and 39, we had a frequency of 1. Now, we want to draw it over its midpoint of 35. So we're going to draw a bar that is over the top of the 35. Now, it should be perfectly positioned so that half of it is to the left and half of it's to the right of the 35. But of course, when I'm drawing on the computer, I'm not so good. 35 to 45, we had nothing in there. Then we had 2, so 2 over the 55. So there's the bar. Between 55 and 65. Okay, so 60 to 69, we had 3, so our next bar is going to go up to 3. And I want you to notice in a histogram, and this is called a histogram, the bars touch. Unlike a bar graph, the bars touch in a histogram. And then next, over the 75, we're going to have an 8. So try and draw this going all the way up to 8. And each of our bars should be the same width. Of course, drawing on here, I'm not so good again. And then we want to go up to 11 over the 85. My bars are definitely not straight. And then 4 over the 90. And I guess I didn't make, I'll need to make one more position for the last class. So I need to make a 105 because we do have one that will be there. Now, notice that this tells us that the majority of our data is over this area where the bars are longer. It tells us that something called the mean and the median will tend to be right in this area. And we'll see that soon in our next couple of videos. We can tell that the center of the data is where the largest bars are. And that is to our advantage to graph the data as a histogram. And I'm going to write that word here just so you can put that in your notes. This is a histogram. Unlike a bar graph, a histogram's bars are touching one another, and our data is in classes like it was here in our frequency table.